Have you ever looked at the man you loved for 14 years and realized he wanted to erase you completely? He built a flawless trap to take my daughter and steal my $3.2 million military settlement by painting me as a lunatic. He thought the judge would pity a crying father, but he made one fatal mistake. Before I was his wife, I was the military's worst nightmare for liars. Hello and welcome to Maya Revenge Stories, where we truly appreciate your continued support despite YouTube demonetizing our channel and leaving us without an operating budget. If you enjoy today's story, please consider supporting us by joining our Patreon to hear longer, incredibly detailed, multi-voice exclusive true stories that we cannot share on YouTube, which you can access by scanning the QR code on your screen or clicking the link in the description or comments. Now, let us dive right into today's story, told through the eyes of our protagonist, Addison Howard. The rain hammering against the tall, imposing windows of the King County Courthouse in Seattle sounded like a relentless drumming that perfectly matched the frantic beating of my heart. It was a miserable Monday morning, the kind that soaked straight through to your bones and left a permanent chill in the air. I was 38 years old, sitting straight-backed at the heavy oak defendant's table in my full military dress uniform. The metallic clinking of my service medals felt incredibly heavy against my chest, a stark contrast to the hollow emptiness forming in my stomach. I had come straight to the courthouse following a grueling 14-hour night shift at Aegis Vanguard Analytics, a private intelligence firm, completely unprepared for the meticulously planned ambush waiting for me. Across the suffocatingly quiet room sat Marcus, the man I had shared my home, my bed, and my deepest secrets with for 14 long years. He was hunched over the polished wooden table, his shoulders trembling slightly beneath his tailored suit. His eyes were perfectly bloodshot, brimming with unshed tears as he dabbed his face with a crumpled tissue. He was executing the role of the broken, terrified husband with sickening precision. Yet, my years of military training and behavioral analysis pulled my gaze past his theatrical despair and landed squarely on his sister, Valerie. She was seated directly behind him in the gallery. Her posture was rigid, but a microscopic, victorious smirk danced at the edge of her lips. Her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. Cold and calculating, she thought they had already won. The nightmare truly began when Marcus's attorney stood up, his sharp voice echoing off the dark wood-paneled walls like physical blows. Your Honor, we are filing an emergency ex parte order for immediate sole custody of the couple's 14-year-old daughter, Chloe. The lawyer did not stop there. He began painting a horrifying portrait of a monster, weaponizing my military background to claim I was suffering from severe, untreated psychological trauma. He looked the judge dead in the eye and stated, "My client's wife is plagued by violent delusions, extreme paranoia, and a complete detachment from reality. She is an immediate physical threat to her own child." I opened my mouth to object to the sheer absurdity of his claims, but the attorney was already pressing a button on a small digital speaker. A chilling sound filled the dead silence of the courtroom. It was a woman screaming, a guttural, frantic wail of someone tearing apart a room in the middle of the night, smashing glass and cursing into the darkness. My breath caught sharply in my throat, choking me. The cadence, the pitch, the raw agony in that voice, it sounded exactly like me. Before my exhausted brain could even process the absolute impossibility of what I was hearing, the lawyer stepped forward and submitted a thick stack of medical documents to the bench. He claimed they were official psychiatric evaluations from a telehealth counseling application, stating unequivocally that I was in a highly dangerous state and required immediate institutionalization. I felt the blood drain entirely from my face, leaving my skin icy cold. I looked over at Marcus, desperately expecting him to jump up and stop this sheer madness. To tell the court there had been some terrible mistake. Instead, he kept his head bowed, playing the tragic victim to absolute perfection. Then, the true nature of this ambush, the real motive behind the grand illusion, revealed itself. The attorney cleared his throat, adjusting his tie before delivering the final, fatal blow. Given the defendant's severe mental decline, Your Honor, we are also requesting an immediate freeze on her assets, specifically the $3.2 million military settlement, transferring administrative control to my client to ensure the family's financial survival during this crisis. $3.2 million, the exact compensation for the jagged shrapnel that tore through my body during a catastrophic deployment accident, the endless surgeries, the agonizing months of physical therapy that nearly broke my spirit. Marcus did not just want to walk away from our marriage. He wanted to systematically strip me of my child, my sanity, and the blood money I had earned with my own broken bones. I turned frantically to the judge, desperate to make him see the truth. Your Honor, please, none of this is true. This is a complete fabrication, I pleaded, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. But the judge looked down at me not with the impartial scales of justice, but with a horrifying mix of caution and deep pity. The fabricated audio recordings and the forged medical documents had done exactly what they were designed to do. The judge slammed his wooden gavel down, the sound echoing like a gunshot in my ears. Temporary 14-day restraining order granted, the judge declared with absolute finality. The defendant is ordered to vacate the primary residence immediately. Visitation with the minor child will be strictly supervised by a court-appointed monitor until a full psychological evaluation is completed. I was escorted out of the courthouse building by armed bailiffs like a dangerous criminal. Standing alone on the concrete steps, the freezing Seattle rain washing over my decorated uniform, the crushing reality set in. I had no home, no access to my beloved daughter, and the man I trusted with my life had just slit my throat in broad daylight. The darkest days of my life had officially begun. But standing in that relentless storm, a cold, sharp, and terrifying clarity began to replace my shock. The sterile walls of the serviced apartment in Bellevue felt more like a meticulously designed prison than a temporary refuge. I stood in the center of the beige, lifeless living room, surrounded by a deafening silence that pressed against my eardrums. My entire existence had been violently condensed into exactly 2 rolling suitcases resting by the heavy wooden door. The only piece of my actual life I had managed to salvage was a small, silver-framed photograph of Chloe and me, taken last summer at the breezy coast. I traced the cold glass over her smiling face, feeling completely untethered, a wandering ghost trapped in the hollow shell of a stranger's life. The nights were always the hardest. The profound isolation wrapped around my throat, making it incredibly difficult to breathe as my exhausted mind endlessly replayed the surreal destruction of my family. 2 days later, I sat in the dim corner booth of a nearly deserted coffee shop, nursing a black coffee that had gone cold hours ago. My newly retained attorney, Elias Vance, slid a sleek silver laptop across the sticky wooden table. Elias was a seasoned lawyer with sharp features and tired eyes, a man who had navigated the murky waters of family law for over 2 decades. He quietly pressed the spacebar, and once again, the horrifying audio recordings from the courtroom filled the small space between us. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to listen not with the raw panic of a victim, but with the deeply ingrained, trained ear of an intelligence analyst. The terror washed over me in freezing waves. It was not merely a close imitation. The slight rasp on the vowels, the sharp intake of breath between screamed profanities, the exact rhythmic cadence of my frustration. It was flawlessly my voice down to every single breath. Yet, I possessed absolute, unwavering certainty that those frantic words had never crossed my lips. We were fighting a phantom, an enemy wielding invisible weapons I could not yet see. The true depth of the psychological warfare Marcus was waging did not become fully apparent until my first supervised visitation with Chloe at a local community park. The morning air was biting, and heavy gray clouds hung low overhead. When my 14-year-old daughter finally walked toward the rusted swing set, shadowed closely by an emotionless court-appointed monitor carrying a thick clipboard, my heart violently shattered against my ribs. I reached out to embrace her, my arms aching intensely for the familiar warmth of my only child. Instead of leaning into my gentle touch, Chloe physically flinched, taking a sharp, terrified step backward. Her wide, fearful eyes darted nervously to the monitor before settling on the muddy ground beneath her rain boots. "Chloe, sweetheart, it is me," I whispered softly, deliberately keeping my hands visible and non-threatening. She wrapped her arms tightly around her own chest, her voice trembling so badly I could barely catch the quiet words. "Dad said you were getting worse. He said you told him you were going to burn our house down while we were sleeping. Why would you want to hurt us, Mom?" The devastating question hit me with the sheer force of a physical blow. Marcus had not merely lied to a judge, he had spent months carefully, methodically poisoning the vulnerable mind of our daughter. He had woven a suffocating web of fabricated terror, actively rewriting her reality and transforming her loving mother into a volatile monster. Every late-night shift I worked, every tired moment I had experienced over the past year, he had weaponized into concrete proof of my impending mental collapse. I was helplessly watching my child drown in a deep sea of lies, and the court monitor's cold, observant glare warned me that any emotional outburst would instantly validate Marcus's vicious narrative. Just when I believed the nightmare had reached its absolute bottom, Elias called me late that evening, his deep tone laced with a grim urgency. He had uncovered a secondary filing buried deep within the convoluted family court documents. Marcus was not simply fighting for sole physical custody. He was actively petitioning the state for a full legal conservatorship over me. He wanted to officially strip away my fundamental human rights, rendering me legally incapacitated. If the judge approved the final petition, Marcus would instantly gain total authoritarian control over my medical decisions, my living arrangements, and most importantly, my financial assets. He was attempting to legally bury me alive. A cold sweat broke out across the back of my neck. I needed a substantial retainer fee for the rapidly escalating legal battle. With trembling fingers, I opened my laptop and logged into my secondary, private savings account, a quiet financial safety net I had maintained for years. The screen loaded, and the glowing blue numbers burned themselves painfully into my retinas. $0.00. I scrolled frantically through the long transaction history. For the past 12 months, exactly coinciding with the period Marcus claimed my mental health began deteriorating, someone had been systematically siphoning off my personal savings. Tiny, untraceable wire transfers, masked perfectly behind mundane digital purchases, had bled the account entirely dry without leaving a single red flag. He had financially paralyzed me long before he ever walked into that courtroom. The paralyzing grief evaporated in a split second, replaced instantly by the icy, calculating focus of a soldier who had just realized she was standing far behind enemy lines. The trap was absolutely perfect, but Marcus had severely underestimated the woman he had locked inside it. The grieving wife died in that sterile apartment, and the intelligence analyst from Aegis Vanguard Analytics took her place. I pushed the 2 rolling suitcases into the narrow closet, cleared the cheap laminate dining table, and transformed it into a tactical war room. My high-performance laptop screen cast a harsh, unforgiving blue light across my face as I booted up my encrypted data mining software. Marcus thought he had outmaneuvered a typical, exhausted suburban mother, completely forgetting that my actual profession involved dismantling complex global deception networks for a living. I began by methodically tearing apart the medical documents his lawyer had so proudly presented to the judge during the initial hearing. The psychological evaluations were printed on the official-looking letterhead of a sleek telehealth application, signed confidently by a doctor named Richard Lindsley. A standard background check yielded nothing unusual at first glance, but I did not do standard. I ran his credentials through the National Medical Database, bypassed the surface-level search, and cross-referenced his identification number with the Washington State Department of Health Registry. The results flashing on my screen were glaringly clear. Richard Lindsley did not hold a valid medical license to practice anywhere in the state of Washington. In fact, his certification had been permanently revoked 3 years ago in Florida due to severe ethical violations. Pushing deeper, I traced the corporate structure of the telehealth application itself. It was nested beneath a holding company registered in Delaware, a classic corporate shell game designed specifically to hide the true owners. It took me 6 grueling hours of hacking through public records, obscure tax filings, and digital footprints to find the underlying articles of incorporation. There, listed securely as a silent partner and a primary financial beneficiary, was Valerie. Marcus's sister had literally manufactured my diagnosis from a company she secretly helped fund and operate. While I was actively tearing down the medical lies, Elias was relentlessly following the money trail. We met late the next evening at his dimly lit office downtown. Sitting nervously next to him was a forensic accountant, a quiet, sharp-eyed man who looked like he had not slept in days. He slid a thick, heavy black binder across the polished mahogany desk toward me. "Your husband has been running a shadow life," the accountant said, his voice grave. "But it is not the cliché affair you might have initially suspected. Marcus has no mistress. His only true lover is unadulterated greed, and that romance has gone catastrophically wrong." The accountant opened the binder and walked us through a dizzying, terrifying maze of offshore accounts, margin calls, and completely liquidated assets. Over the past 2 years, Marcus had heavily leveraged every single joint asset we owned and secretly taken out massive, high-interest loans to dump into a highly volatile, unregulated cryptocurrency hedge fund. When the crypto market inevitably crashed to the ground 6 months ago, the fund imploded overnight. Marcus was left holding the bag, and it was a massive, fatal bag. The ledger revealed a staggering, suffocating personal debt of exactly $2.5 million. "This is not a loan from a friendly neighborhood bank," Elias interjected, pointing at the names of the creditors. "These entities are a syndicate of unregulated private lenders with deep, violent ties to the criminal underworld. They are men who do not send polite collection notices. Addison. They send enforcers." The horrifying picture suddenly crystallized in my mind. Marcus was desperate, cornered like a rat in a burning building. He needed liquid cash immediately to save his own life. My military settlement of $3.2 million was the exact, perfect lifeline he required to pay off his dangerous debt and walk away completely clean. I was nothing but expendable collateral damage in his desperate bid for survival. The financial motive was undeniable, but the audio recordings were still the most damning piece of evidence holding the judge's restraining order firmly in place. I needed absolute, irrefutable proof that my voice had been stolen. I took the raw digital audio files provided during the legal discovery phase and ran them through a highly restricted piece of military-grade spectral analysis software I utilized at Aegis. The program stripped away the noise and translated the raw sound waves into visual, high-definition color maps, allowing me to see the very anatomy of the audio. To the naked human ear, the screaming sounded terrifyingly real, but to an algorithm designed to hunt terrorists and detect deep cover operatives, it was a shockingly sloppy forgery. I sat back in my chair, staring intently at the jagged green and red peaks on my high-resolution monitor, right at the specific points where I was supposedly inhaling deeply between violent screams. The frequency dropped out completely for a fraction of a millisecond. Humans simply do not breathe in absolute digital silence. Furthermore, the pitch variations contained repetitive, perfectly identical acoustic loops. They were digital microglitches. I highlighted the anomalies one by one, confirming my darkest, most cynical suspicion. The audio was a purely synthetic creation, a deepfake generated by advanced artificial intelligence. Marcus or Valerie had fed hours of my normal speaking voice, harvested from old home videos or recorded phone calls, into a voice-cloning software program. Then, they simply typed out a horrific script of a deranged woman for the artificial intelligence to read aloud. It was a digital puppet show, and the family court had bought front-row tickets. I exported the unassailable, hard proof onto an encrypted flash drive, grabbed my coat, and drove straight back to Elias's office through the pouring rain. I slammed the drive onto his desk, my adrenaline pumping so fiercely my hands were visibly shaking. "We need to file an emergency motion immediately," I demanded, my voice sharp and commanding. "We blow the lid off this entire case and have Marcus arrested right now for fraud." But Elias held up a calm, steady hand, unbothered by my sudden outburst. He looked at the encrypted drive, then looked up at me, a dangerous, predatory smile slowly spreading across his face. He shook his head deliberately. "No," Elias replied smoothly. "If we reveal our hand now, Marcus and his high-priced attorney will simply claim they were also victims of a third-party hoax, or they will pivot and find another angle to attack you. We are going to do something much worse." Elias leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. He proposed a far more lethal, calculating strategy. We were not going to tell them we knew anything. We were going to let Marcus walk into his sworn deposition next week, completely confident and utterly arrogant. We were going to let him raise his right hand and swear under the absolute penalty of perjury that those recordings were a genuine reflection of reality, and that his financial state was pristine. We were going to hand him the shovel, and we were going to quietly watch him dig his own grave so incredibly deep that the justice system would bury him under it forever. I agreed instantly, the anger in my chest hardening into cold steel. The time for playing defense was over. We were going on the offensive, and Marcus would not even see the bullet coming until it had already pierced his heart. While I was meticulously building a trap of my own in the shadows, the most crucial breakthrough of this entire nightmare came from the very person I was fighting so desperately to protect. Despite the toxic, terrifying narrative Marcus had relentlessly drilled into her head for months, Chloe was 14 years old and possessed a razor-sharp intuition. She lived in that sprawling house with him day in and day out, and she inevitably started noticing the jagged cracks in his perfect victim facade. It was not the profound, quiet grief of a heartbroken husband that she witnessed on a daily basis. Instead, she saw the erratic, terrifying paranoia of a hunted man whose time was rapidly running out. Every single time an unknown phone number flashed across the bright screen of his cell phone, his face would drain of all color, turning a sickly shade of gray. He would pace the long hallways late at night, sweating profusely, whispering furiously into the receiver, and constantly, obsessively checking the heavy deadbolts on the front and back doors. The definitive turning point happened on a quiet, stormy Thursday evening. Chloe needed to finish a crucial history paper, and the battery on her school tablet had died completely. She cautiously approached Marcus and asked to borrow his heavy corporate laptop. Distracted by yet another frantic, hushed phone call from an aggressive creditor, he carelessly handed the machine over, typed in the password, and rushed out to the dark garage to yell into the phone. Chloe sat at the kitchen island and opened the internet browser, but a minimized window lingering at the bottom of the screen caught her eye. It was a hidden folder buried deep on the desktop, carelessly left open in his state of sheer panic. The title was simply and coldly labeled Audio Assets, curiosity powerfully overriding her ingrained fear. She clicked the small icon. There, staring back at her, illuminated by the harsh blue light of the screen, was the undeniable, chilling proof of her father's monstrosity. She found the sophisticated voice cloning application, complete with complex audio waveforms, rendering progress bars, and high-definition voice mapping profiles labeled with my name. But far worse than the advanced software were the plain text files scattered across the folder. They were meticulously typed draft scripts, filled with horrific, violent, and deranged sentences. Sentences that Chloe instantly recognized word for word from the terrifying audio recordings played by the lawyer in family court. There were even director notes typed in the margins, instructing the artificial intelligence to increase the vocal fry or add a synthetic sobbing effect. She realized with a sickening, paralyzing jolt that her mother was never going crazy. Her father had authored the madness himself, terrified that the heavy garage door would swing open at any second. Chloe frantically pulled out a cheap prepaid cell phone she had secretly borrowed from a sympathetic classmate earlier that week. Her small hands shook violently as she snapped burst photos of the screen, desperately capturing the software interface, the saved voice profiles, and every single fabricated script. She quickly attached the images and sent them to my secure phone number, followed by a single, desperate text message. "Mom, I am so sorry. I believe you now." When my phone vibrated on the cheap coffee table of my sterile apartment and those grainy images loaded onto my screen, time stopped completely. The sight of those typed scripts, fully realizing that my young, vulnerable daughter had to uncover this profound evil all by herself in that empty house, shattered whatever restraint I had left inside my soul. The heavy sorrow that had been suffocating me for weeks instantly vaporized in the white-hot heat of a blinding, maternal fury. He had not just tried to destroy my life and steal my military compensation. He had weaponized our child's innocent trust, dragged her into a highly dangerous criminal conspiracy, and forced her to live in a state of constant, manufactured fear. I touched the glass screen, tracing the words Chloe had typed to me. Right then and there, I swore on my own life that Marcus would pay the absolute highest price imaginable. I forwarded the damning images to Elias immediately. The photos Chloe bravely captured were the final silver bullets we desperately needed to legally connect the digital forensics to physical, real-world locations. Armed with the visual proof of the software and the highly specific timestamps from her photos, Elias filed an aggressive, sealed ex parte motion for emergency subpoenas. Within 48 hours, he legally forced the major internet service providers to hand over their unredacted network history logs. The digital breadcrumbs led exactly where my military instincts knew they would. The IP addresses connected to the heavy data usage of the voice cloning software did not originate from our family home. They traced directly back to a luxury high-rise apartment downtown, Valerie's apartment. Every single piece of the complex puzzle had finally clicked into place. Valerie was the cold architect running the digital deception, and Marcus was the desperate, greedy actor utilizing it to steal my $3.2 million settlement. The invisible, suffocating trap they had so carefully built around me was now entirely inverted. We had locked every door, sealed every window, and boarded up every possible exit. The board was perfectly set for a spectacular, devastating ambush at the upcoming legal deposition. They were confidently walking into a slaughterhouse, genuinely believing they were the ones holding the knife. The deposition took place on a crisp Tuesday morning inside the glass-walled conference room of Elias Vance's law firm. The central air conditioning hummed faintly, mixing with the rhythmic, mechanical clicking of the court reporter's stenograph machine. I sat silently at the far edge of the long mahogany table, my hands folded neatly in my lap, projecting the exact image of a defeated, broken woman they fully expected to see. Marcus strutted through the heavy double doors, flanked by his aggressive, high-priced attorney. He was wearing a sharply tailored navy blue suit, exuding an aura of obnoxious overconfidence. He genuinely believed he was holding all the winning cards. Valerie followed closely behind him, taking a seat against the back wall. She crossed her legs elegantly and offered me a fleeting, pitying glance that barely masked her deep, venomous arrogance. The court reporter raised her right hand. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" Marcus did not hesitate for a single fraction of a second. "I do," he replied smoothly, his voice echoing with absolute conviction. With those two simple words, the trap officially sprang shut. Elias was a master interrogator. He did not attack immediately. Instead, he let out the line inch by inch, asking seemingly disjointed, harmless questions about the timeline of our marriage, our daily routines, and household responsibilities. He purposefully lulled Marcus into a false sense of absolute security, allowing him to dominate the conversation. Then, Elias casually shifted the topic toward the financial aspects of the conservatorship petition. "Marcus, just for the official record, you are urgently requesting total administrative control over your wife's $3.2 million military settlement," Elias stated, flipping casually through his yellow legal pad. "Can you confirm under oath the current state of your own personal finances?" Do you hold any undisclosed, catastrophic debts, perhaps related to failed investments in the cryptocurrency sector? Marcus let out a soft, condescending sigh, looking at Elias as if the question were entirely ridiculous. Absolutely none. My personal finances are in pristine condition. I have zero outstanding debts. I am only requesting control of those specific assets to ensure my wife does not squander our family's future during her severe mental crisis. I am simply trying to protect her from herself. I watched his pulse steadily beating in his neck. He was lying under oath, committing a serious felony without breaking a single drop of sweat. Elias nodded slowly, his face a masterful mask of polite indifference. I see. Let us discuss the audio evidence you submitted to the court. You are testifying today, under penalty of perjury, that you personally witnessed these violent outbursts and recorded them exactly as they happened. Yes, Marcus stated firmly, leaning forward to emphasize his supposed trauma. I stood terrified outside the bedroom door. I recorded those exact sounds on my personal cell phone. They are completely unedited and 100% genuine. Can you describe the specific nature of her delusions during these violent episodes? Elias asked, his tone dropping to a quiet, sympathetic whisper. Marcus, eager to paint his masterpiece of deception and solidify my insanity, took the bait instantly. She was completely untethered from reality. Elias, she would pace the dark hallways at 2 a.m, screaming that the government had hidden microscopic surveillance cameras inside our smoke detectors. A heavy, absolute silence fell over the cold conference room. I did not move a single muscle, keeping my face entirely expressionless. That highly specific, bizarre detail about the smoke detectors did not exist in any of the audio files submitted to the judge, nor was it mentioned anywhere in the forged medical evaluations. It was, however, written explicitly in the margins of one of the unproduced draft scripts Chloe had photographed on his hidden laptop folder. Marcus had just eagerly recited a line from a script his artificial intelligence software had never actually recorded. He had memorized his own lies so thoroughly that he forgot which ones he had submitted as official evidence. Elias stopped tapping his silver pen against his notebook. A tiny, dangerous smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Microscopic cameras in the smoke detectors, Elias repeated slowly, writing it down with deliberate, heavy strokes. Fascinating. Thank you for clarifying that vivid detail. Marcus's attorney looked slightly confused by the exchange, but Marcus merely nodded, completely unaware of the fatal, catastrophic mistake he had just made. Valerie took the hot seat next. She sat rigidly, her posture intensely defensive, ready for a fight. Elias barely even glanced at her as he asked his final questions. Valerie, have you ever interfered in the private domestic affairs of your brother and sister-in-law? Furthermore, do you possess any financial, administrative, or operational ties to the telehealth company that produced the psychological evaluations for this specific court case? Valerie let out a short, sharp laugh, oozing pure condescension. Of course not. I am simply a concerned family member watching my brother suffer through a horrific ordeal. I have absolutely zero connection to any medical application or business entity involved. My sister-in-law is a ticking time bomb, and I swear under oath that she needs to be locked away permanently before she hurts my young niece. Elias closed his thick leather binder with a soft, definitive thud. He looked directly into Valerie's eyes, and for a fleeting moment, the polite mask slipped, revealing the terrifying predator beneath the lawyer's suit. I have no further questions at this time. The deposition formally concluded. Marcus and Valerie stood up, shaking hands warmly with their attorney. They exchanged a subtle, triumphant smirk, entirely oblivious to the monumental gravity of what had just occurred in that room. They walked out of the double glass doors and stepped onto the descending elevator. Firmly believing they had won the war, they had no idea they had just happily signed their own criminal death warrants. The final hearing convened on a heavy, suffocatingly humid Friday afternoon. The atmosphere inside Judge Caldwell's courtroom was thick with unbearable tension. Marcus's attorney wasted absolutely no time. He launched into a fiery, highly aggressive opening statement, demanding the immediate and permanent approval of the conservatorship. He waved the freshly printed transcripts from the deposition in the air like a victorious flag, loudly reminding the court that his client had bravely testified under oath to my supposed violent insanity. He painted a tragic picture of a desperate father simply trying to save his family from financial and physical ruin. When he finally sat down, out of breath and looking exceedingly proud of himself, the courtroom fell silent. Elias Vance did not raise his voice. He did not dramatically object or storm across the room. He simply stood up, calmly buttoned his tailored suit jacket, and walked toward the judge's bench with the terrifying grace of an executioner. He did not carry a stack of defensive medical records. He carried a single, silver-encrypted USB drive and one heavily secured manila envelope. "Your Honor," Elias began, his voice completely level and echoing clearly through the massive room, "we will not be presenting a medical defense today, because my client is not sick. What we have uncovered over the past 3 weeks is not a mental health crisis, but a highly orchestrated, multi-million-dollar criminal extortion ring designed to financially and legally paralyze a decorated military veteran." Marcus scoffed loudly, attempting to roll his eyes, but his attorney suddenly went incredibly rigid. Elias handed the USB drive to the clerk and passed the heavy envelope directly to Judge Caldwell. "Inside that drive, Your Honor, you will find unredacted, official IP history logs legally subpoenaed from the major internet service providers. They definitively prove that the terrifying audio files submitted to this court were not recorded on a cell phone outside a bedroom door. They were synthetically manufactured using highly advanced artificial intelligence voice cloning software. Furthermore, those internet logs trace the heavy data usage directly to the personal, downtown luxury apartment of Valerie, the very woman who just swore under penalty of perjury that she had no involvement in this matter." Judge Caldwell, a notoriously stern woman with absolutely zero tolerance for courtroom theatrics, ripped open the manila envelope. Her eyes darted rapidly across the pages of the forensic accounting report Elias had included. "You will also find verified financial records," Elias continued smoothly, turning slightly to look directly at Marcus, who was now visibly trembling. "These records prove that this supposedly devoted husband is currently drowning in exactly $2.5 million of unregulated cryptocurrency debt, owed to highly violent private syndicates. He desperately needed his wife's $3.2 million military settlement to save his own life, and he was perfectly willing to frame her for insanity to get it." The color instantly drained from Marcus's face, leaving his skin a sickly, ashen white. He opened his mouth to speak, to deny the catastrophic truth crashing down around him, but no words came out. His attorney physically shrank away from him, realizing in real time that his own client had just used him to commit massive legal fraud. But the absolute climax, the masterful finishing blow of Elias's entire strategy, was yet to come. Elias gestured toward the final, heavy yellow envelope resting on the bench, sealed securely with dark red wax. "Your Honor, for our final piece of evidence, we request that you read the heavily restricted military dossier expedited directly from the Pentagon specifically for this legal proceeding," Elias stated softly. Judge Caldwell broke the thick wax seal. She adjusted her heavy reading glasses and scanned the highly classified pages. When she finally looked up, her expression had shifted from deep skepticism to an absolute, towering rage. The silence in the room was so profound, it felt like the oxygen had been completely sucked out of the air. Her booming voice commanded the attention of every single soul in the room. According to these partially declassified documents from the United States Department of Defense, Addison Howard did not serve as a standard infantry soldier. Her official designation was Senior Specialist in Counter-Deception and Psychological Operations. Her primary military directive was the identification, analysis, and neutralization of highly advanced digital propaganda, specifically including synthetic media and deepfake technology. The sheer, colossal irony hung heavily in the air. Marcus had attempted to use fake audio to destroy a woman who literally spent her entire career hunting down and destroying fake audio for the federal government. He had unknowingly challenged a master to a game she invented. "Mr. Vance," Judge Caldwell said, her voice dripping with pure venom as she glared down at Marcus and his terrified sister in the gallery. "This court has been egregiously lied to. I am immediately invalidating the temporary restraining order. Addison Howard is granted full, immediate, and sole physical and legal custody of her minor child, Chloe. Furthermore, the petition for conservatorship is denied with extreme prejudice, and the $3.2 million settlement is permanently secured in a protected trust under the sole control of the defendant." Judge Caldwell struck her heavy wooden gavel with the force of a thunderclap. "I am holding both Marcus and Valerie in severe contempt of court. Bailiffs, you will detain them both immediately. I am transferring this entire evidentiary file directly to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You will both be heavily investigated for federal wire fraud, felony extortion, and severe perjury." Armed guards stepped forward instantly, grabbing Marcus by the shoulders. He looked back at me one final time, his eyes wide with absolute, pathetic terror. But I offered him nothing. No anger, no tears, no gloating. Just a cold, blank stare as the heavy courtroom doors swung shut behind him. Fast forward 6 months. The heavy dark storm clouds that had suffocated Seattle finally broke, giving way to a bright, crisp Sunday morning. The sunlight streamed beautifully through the large windows of the brand-new house Chloe and I had purchased near the water. We were standing in the middle of her spacious bedroom, covered in tiny specks of paint, laughing loudly as we rolled a vibrant shade of ocean blue onto the fresh walls. Marcus was currently sitting in a highly secured federal holding facility, completely denied bail, nervously awaiting a massive criminal trial that would undoubtedly end in a lengthy prison sentence. Valerie was facing her own severe federal indictment, her luxurious life completely shattered, but I rarely thought about them anymore. Standing there in the bright sunlight, listening to the beautiful, carefree sound of my 14-year-old daughter laughing, I finally understood the ultimate truth. The absolute sweetest revenge is not the destruction of your enemies. The sweetest revenge is simply reclaiming the brilliant, beautiful, and peaceful life they arrogantly thought they could steal from you. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for listening to my story today. I would absolutely love to know where in the world you are tuning in from. So please let me know your location in the comments below. If you found today's story incredibly engaging and want to help keep our channel alive, please consider supporting us by joining the Maya Revenge Stories Patreon. There, you can listen to our most shocking, exclusive true stories featuring highly detailed situations and multi-voice narrations that are far too intense for us to publish publicly on YouTube. You can easily join by scanning the QR code currently on your screen or by clicking the direct Patreon link provided in the video description or the pinned comment. Thank you again, and stay safe out there.